Muyiwa, welcome again to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, if you just could introduce yourself quickly, a quick introduction, that'll be great.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Muyiwa Oki. I'm an architect. I work at Mace. I work on modern means of construction projects in our design and technology studio. I ran for the RIBA presidency and I won. And my campaign priorities was focused on speaking up for the future architect. Um, the ambition was and remains simple to challenge unfairness and change it, and so that we can flourish all together as a one community of architects. The basic premise was to introduce diversity, equity, and inclusion within all facets of how we operate. Because one of the basic human needs is to feel included, and an inclusive environment is where folks work productively together towards a common goal. It is where the learned society of the RIBA is needed to bring architects, the built environment, and society together to advance architecture for the benefit of all of us. Um, that's who I am. That's what I'm doing.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Muyiwa. So before we touch the topic of RIBA and the RIBA election, just let's go a little bit back in terms of like your background as a student.
Mhm.
So how was your education like in terms of architectural student? So how was like pretty much your studies, like your goals, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in South London, but I was born in Lagos, in Nigeria. And as a kid, I liked art, maths, philosophy, and I had a desire to create, ultimately, to serve the common good. Um, when I was starting out with in figuring out what I want to do in later in life, when everyone, your parents and your parents' friends ask you what do you want to be when you grow up.
Hmm.
Um, at that time, David Adjaye was talking about urban Africa, and he was commissioned to design the African American History Museum. So I think looking back and reflection on that, there was this sort of icon, making waves within the architecture industry, and I someone looked up to him and thought, if he can do it, I can do it too. And then I went to University of Sheffield, big up University of Sheffield, and for my undergrad, and then I went back for my masters. And within those years, because Sheffield is very much in touch with the community,
Hmm.
they're very they the the course is based on social engagement and participatory learning. And I thoroughly enjoyed that because there was some sort of touch points with the community in which you study and you live in. And I mean, I had a blast there. I did some sort of political, well, not really political, but like I was student rep for a while. I ran for the head or president of the SUAS. I think it's still called SUAS. SUAS was the Sheffield University Architecture Society. Um, I didn't win that. And but what I loved about Sheffield was that it was progressive, it was focusing on the human scale, community engagement, participation, as I said already.
Hmm.
And I mean, a couple of highlights I'd say is I think it was Flora Samuel's lecture in first year when she talked about like she asked us to write an essay about like what who are architectural icons and what we consider an architect, and I remember writing about tried to write about David Adjaye, but also I didn't know about architecture styles and things like that. I wrote about like David Adjaye. I wrote about like Frank Lloyd Wright and Falling Water, and I wrote about this sort of I can't remember. It's called Lakaton and Vassal.
Hmm.
They had a style of architecture that was kind of you know investigative and forensic in nature, and their focus was like off the shelf. items that had some sort of like elegance and economy attached to it. And they, some of the time they were talking about like, architecture doesn't have to be end up as being a building.
Hmm.
It could be, um, it could be, like a set of rules to like make sure that you're upgrading your or retrofitting your property um in the best possible light, as opposed to just thinking about building as the end state for what architects to provide. And I remember they talked about in a couple of interviews that they did. They were like, we help our clients, and we really do a really good Excel spreadsheet. And I thought that was very interesting. um and they've won quite a lot of awards. I learned about the idea of deep retrofit from them. So I don't know. I think in that sort of exploration of my undergrad and postgrad years, I was trying to like figure out like what it is. I mean, what it is I mean, what it is to define ourselves as architects, and what do we want for architecture. What do I want from architecture? So I mean, I've been discussing this in my head for quite a long time, and I think there is now a position. I'm in a position that I can I can sort of put that conversation out there, and people can listen more and then contribute to the conversation.
No, absolutely. And did you had anyone in the family was already an architect, or where did it came the inspiration to follow this career?
No, I didn't have anyone who was an architect in my family. My parents are academics, and I think they were smart enough to let us like discover our own passions and
Hmm.
goals, and it was very less pushy than I'd say for my other friends from the same background. I mean, looking back at it as well, actually, there is a generic or sort of career pathway of a son of Nigerian immigrants. It's typically medicine, law, accounting, and finance. And I knew I couldn't explain it totally to myself, but I did not get a feeling of joy from these options, and I chose to be an architect because I was seduced by the sort of variety of the roles that you can inhabit. You could be the
Hmm.
creative thinker, the artist, the project leader, and then it was like the sort of endless possibilities of what you could design. But like I said earlier, I mean, I had a desire to create and be creative, and in my eyes, architecture is a net positive for serving this passion and this purpose. But also, I think it was just in very very sort of prosaic terms, it seemed like a reasonable thing to do for a kid, 18-year-old kid who liked art, like I said, art, maths, philosophy,
Hmm.
things like that. Yeah,
Okay, and so this year came, and
yeah,
you have the elections to run for River president, and
hmm,
unfortunately you won in July, if I'm not wrong. And
yes.
so how is this like to get elected? What's the process?
What's the process? So, for those who don't know, you you have to get 60 RIBA members to nominate you to go onto the ballot, the official RIBA ballot. And then if you do that, you can then you run a campaign for 2 months. I think it's I don't know. I think around 2 months, and there are rules set by the RIBA, and you follow the rules and make put your message out there and make sure that people vote for you. However,
Hmm.
however, I did it slightly different. I stood on the sort of back of or the shoulders of a grassroots campaign group, alongside my peers, and we had our own internal an internal goal that a message that we wanted to get across, and it was one of the how do we change the needle in equity, diversity, and inclusion, climate action within the profession. And one of the ways we thought that was possible was through the leadership within the RIBA, the institute that represents architecture globally, in some ways
Hmm.
globally, in the UK and definitely globally. And because um, the the opportunity came across because we are in 2020 and it's every 2 years. We thought we could go with a message as a collective and see how far we can get on the ballot.
Hmm.
And we had our internal hostings. I won that hostings, and that then gave me the momentum to get 60 RIBA members to nominate me and then get onto the official RIBA ballot.
Hmm. Okay. And in terms of this, on your own opinion, what would you consider is RIBA? What's the Royal Institute of British Architects? What would you say?
What is RIBA? RIBA is a learned institute. It raises the standard, or it sets the standards for how architects operate. Uh, in its charter and bylaws, it says that it's there to generally the advance architecture to the public. So that's what it's set up to do for the advancement of architecture.
Hmm.
Um, and I argue that to do that, you need to generally advance the people who produce the architecture, and that's architects. And that's where the challenge and the opportunity of and the ambition to define or reimagine what we want for architects and therefore reimagine what we want for architecture. And I mean, I'm going to move on to the sort of points that I was trying to raise.
Hmm.
We need to think about um, the health and well-being of the architect through, and I talked about it through over time and how to address that. We need to think about climate action and how we can give the architects who design and manage architecture the tools the tools, the social and economic tools and drivers to make sure that they are putting the arguments forward for implementing climate change and climate action within their project. And also, it's about our engagement with the body of the RIBA internally as members, and also how we present that to the wider community and the public.
Hmm. Okay. And in terms, like briefly, what in terms of your campaign, what you proposed to do? So, in terms of what's the plans now as a real present for the next year, what you want to implement in UK?
Yeah, so like I said, I think there's a conversation to be had about how we want to reimagine um, what we want, what it means to be an architect, and what we want from
Hmm.
architecture. Like I said, health and well-being over time it shouldn't be required or expected if you cannot be fairly compensated. And I think as a sort of learned institute who sets the standards for how architects operate. That's something that a conversation that we can put on the table and find a solution to making sure that the people who work within the industry are fairly compensated or compensated for them to live a healthy and fulfilling life.
Hmm.
And there's the other question about creating the sense of belonging and how do we engage or increase the engagement of our membership and then in turn increase the public's engagement with architecture. And finally, climate action. How do we set a goal for climate action? What arguments? How can we equip each other to have at our sort of disposal the social and then the sort of financial commercial arguments that we can sell to our clients and again to the public so that we know that they it gives them confidence to hire us as architects, but
Hmm.
also make sure that we are positively serving the common good.
Okay. And do you reckon there's any changes that needs to be made in the terms of the education system, or what's your opinion in terms of this education system related?
Yeah, I think it does start with education. It
Hmm.
does starts in schools of architecture. And I remember, from a personal point of view, actually, when I started, when I did was doing architecture, well, I was studying architecture. The environmental element always felt like a sort of lazy add-on to. I mean, maybe personally to me, but maybe it wasn't the case. But it was more of a like a um, add on to what fantastical things you were doing. Um, and I think now that we are all cognizant of the scale and the importance of climate action, I think it needs to start being like in our daily vocabulary, and that starts from your schools of architecture, and then it should transpire into our day-to-day work in practice.
Hmm. Okay. And I know you already talked in terms of we need to adjust the climate change in terms of the architecture itself and
Hmm.
how to address the issue. But
Hmm.
do you know, or do you have any plans that how RIBA is going to adapt the climate emergency?
Well, I wouldn't want to say exactly right now because
Hmm.
it's all going to be in conversation and in collaboration with industry leaders, practice leaders, people within the RIBA. But I think one of the goals and the vision is to find out what other institutes are doing,
Hmm.
and work together with them, and try to embed that into our offering as the RIBA in the UK and also in the international chapters. I think that's the first protocol.
Okay. Okay, and also because of Brexit, and you might heard this type of questions, but the mutual recognition of architects' qualifications across the EU has no longer applied in the UK. So, is there any
Mhm.
plans to change this, or it's gonna nothing's gonna happen for the next 2 years or so? Do you know roughly how this in terms the recognition of the qualifications are going to work?
It's something that I have to look into deeply.
Hmm.
It wasn't part of my sort of manifesto pledges,
Hmm.
but it's also in some ways it does tie in with that sort of engagement with RIBA members and what sort of value add do we give to the people who are members, and some of our members, I'm pretty sure, are RIBA as they are ARB, and they are from the qualifications are sort of in within the European Union. So people who work here, who studied in the EU, would want to be architects. I would want to be RIBA, chartered architects, and how we can. There is there's a conversation to be had about how we can, if they are members in their home country, what what does that give them as RIBA members in the UK? And I think, again, working on a memorandum of understanding within all the institutes of the EU, for example, Danish. I have a conversation set up with the Danish Institute of Architects, German Institute of Architects, and things like that. And I think there's a conversation to be had. And I don't want to promise anything right now, but if there could be a reciprocity agreement or memorandum of understanding to make
Hmm.
sure that the standards uh, uh, to give confidence to both places that the standards are going to be of equal value. There is it's already it's a good enough selling point to those folks who have um, qualifications outside of the UK.
Hmm. Yeah, completely makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of a more broad topic, so in conversation with Mariana, she's from the Wilder World in Eritrea, and Ollie from Big. So they reckon architects in 100 years' time they'll probably be called something else. And Holly
Mm,
mentioned that architects are now becoming a little more as image creators. Um,
mhm.
so what do you think on this in terms of the purpose of an architect, and how are we becoming in the future?
I sort of I yes, that is a sort of facet of architecture. The image creator, the aesthetic designer, and for too long we have operated on that basis that we do aesthetic design. I have a different opinion
Mm-hmm.
of it. I think architecture is multifaceted, and I believe that we are sort of social designers, designers of like communities and spaces. We are project managers in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
and we are also aesthetic designers. And there are different in different capacities. We can do architecture in different spaces, different places rather. And I want to see I'll build on the work that uh, companies like startup companies like public practice have set up, so that they bring architects into the sort of local authorities. um, I want to see architects in sort of client side, who still recognize themselves as architects and bringing out the using the skills and the learnings from architecture school and practice into their roles as a sort of client side,
Mm-hmm.
a space. Uh, Aesthetic designers and traditional practice is there's still I think there's space for everything, and I just think um, all we need is an institute like the RIBA to recognize that that's possible, and shine a light, champion, connect all of us who are doing slightly different things, but we still feel uh, uh, a part of a community of the people who are called and potentially still be called for the next 10 years at least architects.
No, absolutely. So you got pretty much, let's say, 3 months until you actually full time, let's say, in as a real president. So how base it,
3 months? No. I think it's next September.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
won't start on January. It will start
It was,
from
yeah,
September.
yeah. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And so how that works in terms of your role? Would you be still working as an architect in Mace, or would you completely be a full time for RIPA and not working in Mace? If it makes sense.
I, well, it's because it's such a long time to go.
Mm-hmm.
There are conversations to be had
Yeah.
with my current employer, and what I'd say is that they have been very supportive of the whole thing, and they are more than willing to accommodate uh, the my commitments with the RIBA, and it's in the pipeline. We're talking about it, and we'll need to formalize it in the due course.
Okay. And just probably a more broad question is, how do you see yourself in 5 years? In five
How
years
do I?
time?
Well, that is a very big question. I don't know. I think I will be uh, in some sort of capacity an architect, and I would like to be serving the common good, um, being part of that conversation of how to design the built environment. Oh, and that's another thing. Like my definition of an architect, outside of what you said, your previous guest said about image creators, I think we are the designers and guardians of the built environment. And in my theory of
Hmm.
philosophy is that that can happen in any way, shape, or form. And I actually want to be doing that. That's definitely what I see myself in 5 years doing, designing the built environment in some facet, some way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And what would you say? Um, Probably for the new students in architecture.
Hmm.
Let's because the reason I'm saying this,
Hmm.
especially in my bachelor's,
Mm-hmm.
I had quite a few colleagues that they they were in architecture, but they didn't want to become an architect. They were just like researching about what is to become an architect, or what is architecture, and pretty much a lot of them they went to illustration, to cinema industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, what advice would you give to young architect students, or to those ones are graduated and want to
Mm.
pursue architecture?
Yeah, I think, for example, I think architecture is a good foundation for any type of creative, sort of visually creative the course or the design course. And I think one thing I talked about again in my manifesto was like enabling and championing that sort of digital skills for the future, because that's where we're going. And I think, but that's one thing, it's using or leveraging those digital skills in the marketplace is a net positive.
Hmm.
And if architects, like different professionals, service providers, lawyers, doctors, they have like a sort of tech angle to them. So like they're businesses, companies that are fledgling in the sort of technology space that they do. There's the companies that set up for sort of providing services for those professions and for those industries. And there should be I believe there should be a design tech or archi
Hmm.
architecture tech or something, and that's fine too. And I believe that there are there is space for everyone, and the RIBA as an institute should be going out there and seeing what's out there and sort of showing these younger, the up and coming cohort of students what the value of actually being an architect. There is this sort of myriad of experiences, myriad of ways of practice, um, that there is space for everyone to flourish. And I
Hmm.
think that's one key bit of the RIBA. And if we can grow our membership by doing that, even better.
Okay, and obviously, I'm not expecting you to know this answer to this question, but as population growing,
Hmm.
more and more will be architects in the world.
Hmm.
How do you tackle this issue in terms of the employment? Um, would would you know about, like, there's any plan in terms of to help graduate students to find their first job for their experience, let's say for their part three, or yeah, what's your opinion on this one?
Yeah, I think there is cost of living crisis we're living in there.
Hmm.
And there is the RIBA job board. And then I think there is a conversation to be had about like what types of jobs are we putting in there. Um, I would like to sort of work with the executive team in some ways to figure out how we can reimagine what the offer we the current offer that we have for students who are in that sort of transition phase from university into the workplace. And I think it's by creating partnerships with uh, sort of traditional architecture practices, but also looking for the sort of dynamic sort of uh, uh, companies with the high demand skills.
Hmm.
I don't know, like I remember one of my former colleagues at Grimshaw started his own sort of design technology company called MATLAB, and they're using BIM skills and tools for construction companies like Mace and selling that to Mace. So like there's like architects doing different things, and I think our sort of bolstering a relationship with all these different types of companies, and giving younger people the opening the minds to other avenues within the profession is something that I would very much be trying to like put together and champion.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I know from your LinkedIn profile as well that you were a co-founder of Modular, if that's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, that's
Um,
it.
would you still be being doing this role, or what's actually Modular? What's this company about?
Modular.
Modular.
Yes. So what modular is it's a it's a it's a conversation, or it's a relationship I have with a friend.
Hmm.
I it's a sort of design tech startup called Modular. And we're talking about like what is the how can we package um the services of an architect, and use digital skills, digital design, digital tools to leverage. Let me know. Actually, let me start again. Blah, 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 blah.
That's okay.
Okay, what is modular? What is modular? Okay, I've started this in my spare time with a friend of mine for a year or two, uh, and it's a startup that takes like that records physical spaces, and what we've started is homes for like uh, sort of domestic homes, and what we're using is digital twin technology. Handheld scanners to scan a space and bring it online and give it to homeowners who want to renovate their house. And what we're trying to do is simplify renovation and the design process. So we give them a digital copy of their home, digital twin of their home, and we basically give them a 3D information first as opposed to 2D information so that they can walk around in it and use that as a template for um, the renovation process. What we want to do is use computational design to translate 3D point cloud information into 3D rich um, uh, BIM components in Revit, and that thing that we're working on. So how do you do that automatically as opposed to manually?
Hmm.
And the final output is on um, sort of real-time rendering software. So we're trying to use the tools that we use in very large commercial outfits, and try to see how we can scale that down for the benefit of an end user, a homeowner. And yeah, that's what it is. And we it's a conversation. It's a sort of test bed for that.
Oh, that's perfect. That's very interesting. Especially now that we're entering an era of metaverse, isn't it? And so people are more like interested to see their homes on the screen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think there is, again, I think people in like the residential sector is not very well served, and we know that. In London, for example, there is like it changes by less than 1% every year. So they're like housing stock, a stock of housing that um, had that need renovation but aren't changing. And how do you tap into that and increase the amount of renovation, and make sure that houses are up to date and up to standard?
Hmm.
um, and yeah, if we are in that space and trying to do that, I know this is our sort of offering to the world.
No, no,
to
that's great. And is
the,
it up and running or still in the process of testing?
we're still in the process of testing. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's great. No, I'll keep all the links on the description.
Hmm.
I'll also put the Gordon interview that you had previously, so people can just follow you more of your work and your
Yeah.
social media as well. Oh, that's
Nice.
perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Cheers.
you.